So we'll go ahead and get started. I want to say, first off, thank you to our three panelists for joining us this afternoon, taking time out of their day to speak with us and students alike who are interested in working in the healthcare field, in the health world in general, in such a broad area and so many different phrases, terms, career paths that you can take. So really excited to have this conversation today and learn from our three panelists. I'll start with introductions and just go through the three participants that we have. From there, I'll ask about 45 minutes worth of questions, and we'll go through all different facets of the industry. And then from there, I'll open it up for student questions. If you feel comfortable taking your mic off of mute, feel free to do so, but also feel free to drop your question in chat, either privately or publicly. Kathy and I will be monitoring with Brad as well for questions that come through there. And so with that, I want to get started and just say thank you for our three panelists. First, we have Renetta from Ensemble Health. We also have Ed from Omnicom Health Group and Tom from Mental Health America. So three of you, thank you for joining us. We'll dive right in. And I'm really interested in hearing if you could briefly describe your current role and what a typical day looks like for you.
Sure. So I'm Renita Varghese. I am the program manager here at Ensemble Health Partners. I've been with the organization for almost 2 years. We are a newer organization. The company started in 2014. The first year that the company was in existence, that first year we had about 200 people. As of right now, we're close to over 6,000 people. So the rate that our company is growing is insane. The reason that I was brought into the organization is that revenue cycle is what we do, and it's really not taught in universities. It is something that is part of the healthcare field, but not necessarily a coursework. So the reason I was brought in is to build awareness of the industry and find candidates for our internship and what we have is an entry-level leadership program. So they had never had internships before, and so I built the internship program from scratch, and I hire for the internship and LIT program and follow those candidates throughout until they are placed out of the program.
Yeah, and my name is Tom Starling. I'm the CEO of Mental Health America of the Mid-South. Mental Health America nationally has about 200 affiliates. You're probably aware of the American Heart Association or the National Cancer Society. Mental Health America is just like them, except we deal for everything mental health related. That might be suicide prevention, anti-bullying in schools, Alzheimer's support, recovery from human trafficking and traumas, just a big variety, a wide swath of education programs, referrals, screenings. So you don't call Mental Health America for surgery or for counseling, but we can help you get to the right care at the right time. And together we serve about 100,000 Tennesseans annually.
Wow, to be in such company. I'm Ed Frankel. I lead talent acquisition for Omnicom Health Group. Omnicom Health Group. We're a global healthcare communications agency network, which means we're essentially a collection of healthcare-focused advertising agencies. We have a presence throughout the U.S., across Europe, and in Asia. Again, I lead recruiting, which means my team's responsible for identifying and hiring exceptional talent. We hire interns, entry-level people, all the way through presidents. We have, for my group manages recruiting for, it's about 20 different companies, and I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing that and introducing yourself. It's really great to hear different range of positions that we have represented here. And so I am now interested in hearing about how you got started in this industry. Was it a class in college? Was it something you went into college knowing you were going to go into this industry? How did you come about going into health?
Well, for me, I'll share. I'll jump in there. So I started my career when I was in college. I was a production assistant in New York City working on TV commercials and music videos. And I wasn't thinking it was going to be my career. It was just like good money and it was fun. And then when I was approaching graduation, a director that I was working for a lot offered me a job. I thought I was going to go work at Accenture. That was my plan. I was interviewing at Accenture. And the way he figured out what he would pay me is he asked me, what does Accenture pay entry-level people? And I told him, and he said, okay, I'll pay you the same thing. so that was hard to say no to, because like working on TV commercials I never thought I could actually do that as my job forever. I just was like my college gig. And then I was working in that, and I found myself working in recruiting after the first .com bubble crash. I don't know if anybody here remembers that, or many of you probably don't, but it was like around 2001 too. Thank you. Yep. And Brad gets it. So I found myself in recruiting, and then fortunately for me, made my way back into working in advertising and marketing about 10 years ago. A friend of mine told me about an awesome opportunity, and that's how I'm here. The thing that I've learned, though, so I don't work in healthcare, but I work in healthcare-focused communications. So, but the thing that I've learned is all these experiences build on the next thing. So there's no such thing as like a wasted experience. Everything helps prepare you for the next thing, even if it doesn't connect at all. So it's a little bit of my journey. Probably not the same as everybody else's.
Yeah, so I actually graduated graduated with an IT degree. And when I came out, the industry was not great at the time for the IT work. So I went a completely different route and got into retail. I worked for a large organization for over 14 years. And during my time there, I managed teams of 80, but my strength was really that talent, finding the best talent for different roles. So I got into corporate recruiting and did their college relations program there. Then I went into IT, so kind of went back into the field, but did IT recruiting. And then, like I said, just 2 years ago, I got into healthcare. It kind of just fell into my lap, the opportunity. I knew that healthcare was something that was never going to go away. So it was really interesting to see how it was a different side of healthcare. You know, you think of that traditional medical side, but there is so many facets and opportunities that you can go, but still be healthcare related. So that's how I got into my role.
You don't want to take the route that I took. Mine is the bad route. I was a minister for 5 years and then an educator in universities for about 10. And I ended up marrying ministry and education to become a professional do-gooder in the nonprofit community. And fortunately, I've been in this role for about 20 years through the Alzheimer's Association, United Way, and now Mental Health America. I would highly suggest if I'm not a clinician at mental health, you would need to major in something like nonprofit leadership or business. But I would really suggest, those types of routes and avenues to get into the nonprofit world, whether it's for any association, not just a healthcare association, but if it was the Car Wash Association or the Engineers of America, you definitely need kind of that nonprofit experience. And then having fundraising experience is the fast track to the top.
That's awesome. All great pieces of advice. And it's interesting that you all kind of mentioned that it wasn't what you wanted to do or not necessarily not what you wanted to do, but it wasn't on your path and it kind of came to you. And so I kind of want to stay on that for a second. I'm interested in hearing some of the conversations you might have had during the time you were transitioning over to this industry, over to this field, your current role. What were some of the questions you were asking yourself about this industry or about the role that really made this role stand out to you and want to dive into it head first?
So I'll go first this time. Believe everyone who says it's not what you know, it's who you know. There's a lot of people who are good at the exact same things that you do or are going to do. So I think it's really important for you to align yourself with good people, the right people, to network, to volunteer, get that edge on experience. If everybody has an MBA, do they have your type of MBA or your type of MBA with the business you have? Kind of come in at an angle for it. But I think that if you could consider even some lifelong education, after college, consider a master's, Consider becoming a licensed mediator. Consider getting a certificate from some program. Those types of things really help to open doors, but not as much as getting to know the right people who know when those doors are about to open.
I would like to piggyback off of that in regards to similar experiences. You're going into college, you have the same curriculum as many of the students that are sitting right next to you. So what makes you different? What makes you stand out? So if you have the same classwork, you're doing some internships, are you, like Tom said, are you, taking on leadership? Are you doing volunteering? That's what really differentiates you. And I 100% agree. It's about people you know as well. And you get that networking from the internships, the leadership, connecting with folks from different backgrounds, just to things that you would never think that you would get connected to. Maybe a leader that has a connection to somebody else. And then, you have a great relationship, you do something really well, and they connect you. The other thing I will say that is really important is also bloom where you're planted. So if you're also in a role that is not of interest to you, but you have a career path or a goal in mind, you have to be successful in where you are to show that you can accomplish and move forward for you to be transitioned to potentially what you want to do.
That is excellent advice. It's interesting. I get asked all the time by hiring managers, like, and I'm hiring an intern or this somebody out of college. Like, they're all the same. Like, how do you even tell if they're great or not? And we really believe past performance is an excellent indicator of future performance. So, like, the idea of bloom where you're planted, that's what you said. Yep. It's easy to differentiate yourself as a student because oftentimes students don't do anything to differentiate themselves. So it's great when somebody shows up with a 3.4 out of a good university. But if there's nothing else on their resume, they're not going to, they're going to get the 8 or 9 seconds that I'm giving their resume, and we will move on. But if you were part of an organization that you helped lead, rather than being a part of 12 organizations where you maybe show up for a meeting every once in a while, it's a big difference. It's a big differentiator. For me, when I was early in my career, it was exciting working on Wendy's TV commercials. Like, I hung out with Dave Thomas, and he was I did a push-up contest with James Earl Jones. Like, those are cool things I can reflect upon in my life. But I wasn't rewarded. I feel really lucky that I made the move into to where I've gotten. But along the way, every job I had, I wasn't trying to showboat anybody. I just, if I had to be on a location at 6 a.m., I was there at 5:45, ready to go. Like, where do I need to be? And being a team player. And it's interesting, Tom mentions the idea of who you know. I can reflect on every job I've had. Who's the person that I knew previously that led me to that opportunity? So where I am now, I was complaining to a friend, I'm about to have my 5th manager in 4 years. And she's like, I think I know of something that would be amazing for you. And the job before that, I was on the phone with a friend in finance. We're just catching up with each other. Finance was like 2010. Things were a disaster. He was complaining because nobody was making any money. And I'm like a guidance counselor, not a recruiter right now. And he said, wait a second. I think my girlfriend's company is looking for somebody. Every opportunity. So it's like, what's your reputation? What do people think of you? Are you well represented? It will lead you to, it will. But you can't be afraid to vocalize what you're interested in doing. If you never tell anybody, nothing will ever happen.
Yeah, that's all really great pieces of advice. And we'll talk about networking and having conversations and really standing out to recruiters and to employers and to people who you just meet professionally in general. And we'll get to that in just a second. But I want to stay on this concept of standing out. And right now, with everything being virtual and it kind of just being a phone call, Zoom world, but then applications are coming in, right? So we talk about standing out in terms of signals of alignment between your company. But from your lens, I'd love to hear strategies for students to be able to stand out on their resumes or just overall application, all being online.
Well, it's interesting. So there are 25 of us here today, and I could speak from previous experience. Maybe because I'm going to call it out, the number will go up a little bit. The people that I will most likely connect with on LinkedIn are my fellow panelists. Paul and I are likely already connected, and the professors that are on here. Kathy, I don't know if Kathy's a professor, or Brad, but I think you work for the university. So we'll probably connect. And then, but like Amanda and Isabel and Yulia and Carolyn and Hayden and Jamie and Sammy, like I'm probably not going to proactively reach out to you and say, hey, let's connect on LinkedIn, because it's like, are you going to take the initiative? Like, wow, I never thought about a career in advertising. Like, I don't think I want to be a bench scientist. I'm going to send that guy a LinkedIn message. Like, odds are maybe one or two of you are going to take that step, because some of you are thinking, did he really, like Sabrina's thinking, does Ed really mean it that I can send him a note on LinkedIn and say, hey, can I connect with you on LinkedIn? Because people are like, did they really, I hear that all the time. Did he really mean it? It's okay to go to my career website and apply for a job, and you'll be amongst the other many thousands of people that do that. But how many of you will take the extra step of saying, I'm going to find out if there's a Vanderbilt alum that works at that company, and I'm going to send that person a message, and I'm going to say, I go to Vanderbilt, you went to Vanderbilt, can we just connect, because I'd love to hear about your experience working at X, Y, Z. Because nobody does that, by the way. Nobody does it. I really respect the people that have the courage to message my CEO, because if you message him, he gets back to you, and the guy gives everybody time. I'm like, how do you even do that? Because barely anybody does it. So like, there's 1,000 tips. I'm gonna let Tom and Renetta share some tips, but like, the follow through is so critical. It's so critical, and it's so easy. And there will be people, by the way, that never get back to you, and that's okay. There's a lot of people out there. We just move on.
Yeah, I agree with the LinkedIn request. We go through so many people at the career fair, but like Ed said, who is really going to take that extra effort to connect with you outside of that 5-minute conversation at a career fair? One thing I also appreciate from a career fair perspective, networking perspective, is for students to actually know or have a high level understanding of what the company does, especially in an interview process, but even at a career fair perspective. It takes only 5 minutes to breeze through a website, look at videos just to see if it's a fit. But that shows me as well that you are being proactive in your career search. You've looked at opportunities that may be a good fit versus coming onto an event and saying, tell me what you do. That's your time to actually tell us about yourself and give your elevator pitch. So I would want to know more about you, and then answer any questions that you may have additional to the internship or things that may be interesting that you've noticed on our website.
I would really be against anything like using wacko fonts to stand out or creating some type of new and ingenious resume format. I don't think it's about the format. I think it's about the content. We'd rather it kind of look standard and professional than, maybe too creative. So kind of look at that. You'd be surprised how many resumes and cover letters I receive that they're incomplete sentences, misspellings, and yet one of the things they highlight on their resume is that they're attentive to detail. So, we kind of, look at that. I would also remind you that you're probably applying for a job and that HR director or that CEO is probably like a baby boomer or something older. So that's why, to us, something like LinkedIn or something very respectful, without a lot of acronyms, really speaks volumes to us. These days too, I know for larger companies, computers are very selective. AI is used to identify good resumes. So go through your resume and be sure that in your cover letter and resume, you're using the exact words that they're using in there. Finally, just know that even though we older folks aren't really great with social media, we do our own creeping on our on your social media when you apply. So you might as well just go ahead and give us a link to like your YouTube channel or your website to where we could really get a more true picture of how you're presenting yourself.
And if you don't want somebody to see it, Make your Twitter feed private. Make your Instagram private. Kill that old YouTube page where you were doing whatever. You know, if you don't want it to be seen, get rid of it.
Yeah, I would recommend Googling yourself every couple months just to see what is out there, and what is out there. If you want it to not be out there, then make sure that you lock stuff up.
All great pieces of advice there. I want to switch gears for a second and kind of transition into a little bit of story time, and feel free to take a second after I ask this to think about. But I mentioned hearing about a positive networking experience that either you had when you were looking for a job or you had when a student was looking to connect with you.
I can actually share something there. You know, I have tried the Rotary, the Chamber, the National Business Journal. I really like their events. I would really suggest two things. First, get involved with any professional association that you want to go into. Trust me, if there is a car wash association, there is also an association for the specific healthcare group you're going into, from phlebotomists to heart surgeons. And they always have a young leaders council. In fact, there's also in every major city kind of a young leaders council that trains you how to be a strong board member for community organizations and nonprofits. And those are good opportunities to meet with people in the field as well. They'll train you to be board members. But one thing that I did that really made a big difference in my life was I identified 2 or 3 people that I really wanted to get to know, because I didn't have access to those power brokers to help me out. So I actually called Martha Ingram's son, John Ingram. I'm sure there's a building or two at the Vanderbilt campus named after the Ingrams. And I called a couple of other folks and said, hey, I would just love to meet with you quarterly to pick your brain. You've always stood out to me. You're a philanthropist, you're a leader, and I'm young and just have some questions. And they were stunned. They were like, why would anyone want to meet with me? And I was like, okay, you're millionaires, you're philanthropists. I mean, you could go on, but they were very humbled by that opportunity. And they were like, yeah, I'll give you an hour every quarter. And I just, learned to kind of ask some questions from them. They got to know me and they helped to open doors. And again, I shot high, and I was very shocked that they would want to meet with me and help me. But that's not much to ask of somebody. 1 hour a quarter for a year. You send them a plant or something to say thank you after that year, and see if maybe they'll hire you or keep you in mind or be a reference for you. But you ask nothing else of them as you approach them with that meeting request.
Renata, is there anything? I was going to jump in there.
Ed, if you want to go first.
Sure. Well, I've been recruiting for a long time. I've been in this space for a long time, and specifically in the media and advertising space. And occasionally I'll have somebody say to me, like a colleague or somebody that works in my network or sphere or whatever, and they'll say, hey man, I want to just thank you again for all those years ago passing my resume along. And I swear I'll be like, I passed your resume along? And they're like, yeah, I emailed you cold and you wrote me back and you said, I'll pass your resume along, and you did, and I got the job. They're like, you don't remember? Okay, no, here's the truth. I get resumes pretty regularly, but I only pass the ones along that I think are compelling, by people that have taken the moment to do what others have said on this call, like researching the company, not calling me Tom Starling, but calling me Ed Frankel, getting my name right, paying attention to those details where I've said, if I pass a resume along, usually what it says is like, here's somebody that's interesting. I don't know them. It's totally your call regarding how to handle it. Because I'm not I don't say you have to interview this person. It's like your call, when we pass people along. And so I find I get a lot of happy every time that happens. I'm like, it makes me so happy because, you're helping people make their moves. I mentioned earlier, every job I've had has been because of networking. I'm going to share with you how I got my first job in TV production in New York City. I never thought about working in TV production ever in my life. And a girl I was dating, her uncle was a advertising agency producer. we were like at a family barbecue, and he was talking about work, and he's like, I'm actually going to be in New York in a couple of weeks. We're shooting, what was it called? Is Piggly Wiggly a grocery store chain? Piggly. Yeah. Okay, that's coming to mind. So that's got to be what it is. They were shooting a Piggly Wiggly commercial, and he's like, we're going to be shooting in New York. You should totally come and hang out. Like, come and see what I do. It's like, yeah, okay, I'll come and hang out. And so he's like, gave me the information. He's like, call the studio the night before. They'll tell you the call time, exactly where you should like meet, you know? And the night before, I called the studio, and this guy answers, and I'm like, I explain, I'm Evan Petty's whatever, and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh my God, that shoot got moved. I can't believe Evan didn't tell you. But he heard client's friend. Evan was the client of the people I was calling. So they were like, but we're shooting something, whatever. I don't even remember what it was. We're shooting something else in Hoboken, New Jersey, tomorrow. If you want to come, you could be my guest on the shoot. Because he heard Evan, the client, he wants to be able to do the right thing by the client. And I'm like a college kid. I'm like, yeah, I'd love to. Are you sure? He's like, come on down. The call time was like 6. He's like, come at like 8. I was there at 8 o'clock on the dot. It was excruciatingly boring. It was boring. There was setting up lights. There was lots of just standing around waiting for the people to do their jobs. So I started just helping. Like the guy that answered the phone was the stage manager. So I'm like, what can I, his name's Drew. Drew, what can I do? He's like, you don't have to do anything. I'm like, I'm bored out of my, like, let me just, whatever. So I was like moving chairs. I was like helping with craft service, which is food. At the end of the day, the producer on that shoot was like, hey, would you want to come back and be an intern with us? And I had a job at the time. I was like a little college job. I'm like, no, I've got a job. He's like, no, I'll pay you. And that's what started it. I didn't even know anybody there. But I followed through. And then when I showed up, I was just like trying to be helpful. I'm like, they're being so, let me hang out here. But never know how it's going to lead to the gig. I don't know, I'm sharing that story, but it was that was my networking story. Evan led me to that. I've never spent a day. I don't think I've seen, I broke up with the girl shortly thereafter. I have not seen Evan Petty since. I don't even know. I'm going to go on LinkedIn and find out where Evan Petty is. So yeah, it was 25 years ago. 25 years ago, and it led me on this crazy path. So
half of life is just showing up, right?
Yes, Tom.
So what I would say is it was from an interaction that I had with a student. I was at a career fair and in person, so before all of COVID hit. And so the student there's a long line of students, and this kid just, walks past everyone, goes behind me, is looking at the table and is being disruptive. And so I stopped, I grabbed the student, and I said, I'm going to finish with this student and I want to talk to you. And so I had a conversation, gave them feedback about, I'm not sure if this is the role that you're looking for, but if that's how you're approaching other people's booths, that's an immediate turnoff to a lot of recruiters. They will not respect you because you're not being respectful. So then we connected, and he didn't know what he wanted to do in regards to career. And at that time he was a freshman. So we stayed in contact. We would connect maybe once or twice a year just to say, how's things going? How's classes going? And we had built such a good relationship, and I had connected that student to other, exploratory conversations, that he ended up doing an internship with us for 2 years. He then went into a manager role and is now a leader within that organization. So I would say just make sure that you're aware of what you're doing, but also as you're going through that process, build relationships, ask for feedback. Some companies may not give it to you. I know I do, because if you're doing something wrong and you don't know, how are you going to improve? So I will set up a call and have that conversation, but just always ask for feedback, utilize your resources, and really learn from experiences. I may have a, feedback session with you, and then if you don't ever check back in with me, I don't know if you really took that advice. So I really appreciate when students come back to me and say, I listened, I heard, I adjusted this for my next interview and I got the job, or, they gave me additional feedback and that's how I was successful. So always ask for feedback and don't be afraid to do it.
Incredible. Awesome pieces of advice. It's crazy how much one conversation can really help you along the way. The three of you have touched on this, and I want to stay here for a second on the topic of doing research on an employer, doing research on a company. So we talk about that a lot. As coaches, we speak with students about make sure you research the company, research employers. I'm interested in hearing from the three of you. What does that mean to you when we talk to students about, oh, go research an employer, read the company website? What are some things that you would hope that they pick up, or things that they read about for the conversation that you're going to have with them?
So what I recommend is just understanding at a high level what the organization does. So we do revenue cycle, which is, sometimes can be confusing, but just having an understanding at a high level. I do ask in my interviews a high level definition of rev cycle, just to see if they've done their research and can really kind of walk me through it. Something else is I always ask them to just look at any recent news articles, any Google alerts on what's going on with the company, just to say, especially in an interview, something that might be exciting. So we've integrated with so many clients, and we're now in 39 states versus, a couple months ago, we were only in 20 some states. So just anything that might, be out there that they can just quickly see and show to me that they took the energy to understand what we do.
Yeah, I would suggest two really good resources. Really, the one is GuideStar. GuideStar is a website that has everything about every nonprofit, whether it's a big nonprofit healthcare system, or if it's Vanderbilt, or if it is a small mom and pop nonprofit. They will list on GuideStar your 990s, your mission, a list of your board members. So you can kind of get on there too and see if you know anybody related to the organization. But when anybody during an interview says, I looked on your 990 and it didn't look like you had a spectacular year, but it looks as though that fluctuates year to year. Can you tell me more about that? I'm like, wow, they know where to go to find, that's not on our website. They know to go to GuideStar. Or even in Middle Tennessee, there's one that's a little better called Giving Matters, but it's specific to the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee and only has Middle Tennessee nonprofits. The other thing is, if you could ever just casually slip in the fact that you know our mission statement. Nobody's going to say during an interview, can you quote our mission statement? But if you just happen to take a phrase, or if it's just 20 words, if you happen to just kind of let that flow out during a conversation, we would be taken aback by that. And then, I would just also add, kind of keep the whole thing casual, keep it a conversation. If they ask you a question, say, that's a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that. Could you each tell me a way that your colleagues would, an adjective used to describe you? What would your colleagues say about you? And asking them the question back really makes them more comfortable, understand that this is a conversation that you're easy to get along with. But I really like GuideStar and the mission statement a lot.
I agree with everything that was said. I'm going to add to it. When you roll into an interview, preparation is critical, but so is being hyper present in the interview. I get to see a lot of different feedback that is collected from interviewers. And oftentimes what I see is they just didn't seem that interested in the role. They didn't seem that excited about it. They understood what we do, but I don't know if they really did enough homework. I'm not sure they really read and understood the job description. So my advice is, if you get the interview, if you're like, I don't think I'm really that into this, I don't really want this job, don't bother interviewing. Because if the recruiter's good at their job, they're taking notes and it's going in some system and it lives there for a while. Mm-hmm. So if they're like, Ed just didn't seem that interested, he wasn't engaged, like that's negative feedback that could impact you for future opportunities at that company. So if you do think, I think I do want this job, I'm not totally sure. When you're interviewing, you have to let the recruiter believe that this is the job you want. Oh my God, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today. I'm so excited about the worst job ever at your company, because your core values, the responsibilities, I know I want to do this job. I'm so excited. Thanks for letting me be here today. I actually encourage people to say at the top of the interview, thank the interviewer for sharing time, because you're really excited about the opportunity. You're setting the tone But if you're like sort of phoning it in, you're like, yeah, okay, I don't really have any questions. You're just like, you don't have to worry. You're not going to get the gig. It's not going to work out for you. So be hyped, be prepared, and then be into it. Be into it. If like my computer was like this and I'm like barely engaging you guys, I don't know what Tom said. I wasn't paying attention, but I'm going to repeat everything he just said. Like you guys would hate me. Just be a waste of your time. So be ready to roll. Be ready to roll. And then like, it's so easy. It's so easy. So just a little piece of advice. Well, actually, I'm going to add one thing to it if I can. So we're all doing this home thing, right? Like my first setup was not where I'm sitting right now. It was on the other side of the room I'm in right now. And I have a family. There's kids in my house, and like it's constant. And people were walking behind me all the time. And then people were like, wow, your wife does a lot of laundry. And I'm like, my wife works full time. Oh my God, this person in the last 2 weeks has seen my wife carrying a laundry basket and now thinks my wife just does laundry all the time. So I was like, I'm changing my setup. I want to change how people are perceiving me. I moved to the other side of the room. That was a TV that wasn't getting used. It keeps me warm. So you have the opportunity. Think about your space that I'm in right now. Which story is this telling? Where I am sitting. Is it going to be distracting to the interviewer? Are they going to walk away with some biases against me because of my space? So I really want you to put some thought into setting up the shot. And I'm not just saying that because I work in advertising, because it will impact how people perceive you.
And to tie back to working from home, still being professionally dressed for your interviews. I've seen folks that have worn hoodies, tank tops, PJs. It is still an interview. Especially for a lot of leadership positions, you are networking with, senior leaders within organizations. And if you can't come to an interview dressed appropriately, how do I know that you're going to come to a meeting with a president, CEO, your manager, and are dressed like that? So just making sure that you are aware of what you're wearing and, like Ed said, your surroundings when you are doing interviews or having any sort of networking or exploratory conversations.
Definitely great pieces of advice. In terms of background, I mean, Zoom backgrounds are wonderful. I have a Zoom background up because I admittedly have not yet taken my Christmas tree out of my apartment. So I don't want people to know I still have it setting up. And so having Zoom backgrounds on, if you can't find an appropriate setting for an informational interview, a formal interview, or a conversation in general, feel empowered to find a Vanderbilt Zoom. Like this is from Vanderbilt University. So feel free to do that as well. And I want to pivot on to something Tom just talked about in terms of a resource. He talked about the resource for researching companies and talking about what you know. And I want to stay on the idea of resources really quick. Do you have any resources, whether that be a book, a podcast, a class, or just any piece of advice or links that you have and you'd recommend sharing to the students that we have here regarding professional development?
I would just say use career services, utilize your professors. Professors have a real connect to companies. So utilize what the university has. It's something that you're already there. You already have hands-on access to. So they're there to support you. I know sometimes you're like, oh, career services, and ignore that free resource. I know that, I didn't utilize it as much as I should have. And I realized that was really not smart of me to do. So utilize what you have. It's there. They're there for a reason. They're there to support you. And they have connections.
Yeah, I'm at a little bit of loss. I mean, I think that, again, GuideStar and Giving Matters are really great when it comes to the nonprofit field. Organizations in town like the Young Leaders Council who like to tee up people to be board members on professional associations, trade associations, and nonprofits. And usually within those groups, those leaders, those professors of those community organizations that do the training, as well as the colleagues who are taking the class along with you, they know the skinny, they know the lay of the land, they know the landscape. They will let you know, that organization is well we don't work with that organization anymore. I mean, you will really find out those types of, the reputation of different organizations, because it's hard to have that in unless you're a part of that young board leaders, young ambassadors group. So, go ahead and get in early and make those relationships early. And that way, when you have questions to ask, you can get it from word of mouth. It won't just be going to a government website or something like that. You'll be able to get the real skinny on that organization.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. And so before opening up to student questions, I want to make sure to give the three of you an opportunity, if you have any last pieces of advice for students currently interested in going into careers in health and thinking about spring semesters coming up. Any final piece of advice that you would have for a student looking to have a summer experience?
Don't wait until June to start looking for a summer internship. I would encourage you all to start today. I'm sure some of you have already been out there thinking about it, looking at what are the different categories in health. I think talking with career services is like, of course, why am I not? But I agree. I don't think I really spent much time with career services because I had a job in college. I guess I was lucky that way. But get started early and be organized. You all have access to Microsoft Excel. Like it's simple, like company, the opportunity, maybe a link to the opportunity, and then like notes, like I applied for the job on this day, or I sent a resume to this person, so that you're organized. Have your resumes. You're not going to have just one version. You're going to have multiple versions because you might have to adapt it based on what Tom said, right? Like use the words in the job description. So when you're saving the resume, it could say like Aditi resume, hi Aditi, sorry, Aditi resume, with the date that you submitted it, so that if you get the conversation, you know what version of the resume you sent them. Get organized and treat it like it's a job. Like treat finding a job like a job. It deserves that respect. I wouldn't recommend 3 o'clock in the morning. Do it during business hours. I'm going to do an hour a day of trying to find an internship or an hour a day of getting a job. And that's a good way to stay motivated, because if you're just like frantic, oh my God, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, I've been up for 17 hours straight, submitting 400. My goal this week is to submit 400 resumes. Like, you'll fail. So take your time and be organized, because it will absolutely pay off in the end.
I'm sure that companies are doing info sessions or some sort of networking event. So you may say, oh my goodness, this is my goal. This is where I wanted to end up as a career. And then you go to their info session, and you're like, ooh, this is not what I wanted to do. Utilize those opportunities to find as much information, build relationships, and that will help determine if that's the route that you want to go. I know that, people may have an idea of this is where I want to land. And when you get there, you're like, this is not what I expected. So utilize those info sessions, networking events to really make sure that because we're interviewing you, but you're also interviewing us and making sure that it's a match for you all. So that's really important to, take that time and interview us to see if it's truly a fit. You're going through college. This is a lot of time. You don't want to, every experience is a learning experience, but if you can learn throughout the process, then that will help, get you set up once it's closer to graduation.
Yeah. There is too, I was just thinking, there is actually in most cities a Center for Nonprofit Management. The Center for Nonprofit Management here does an excellent job. They probably provide about 15 workshops a week on task management, project management, fundraising, special events, board management. So, those are opportunities to network. There's also a group called Hands On Nashville, and you could volunteer one day or a half day at an organization that's one along your career path. And it might just be putting together packets or, something mediocre. But while there, just to ask the receptionist or somebody, hey, could I speak to one of your managers about what you do and get to know the organization a little bit? Even that type of initiative speaks volumes. And then to really almost treat that like your initiative of an interview, And you could even form a relationship with that person and get to say, hey, let me, I know you're not hiring anytime in the future, but could I pick your brain about some of these other companies that I'm applying to really kind of establish that type of relationship through a short-term volunteer experience. And then also I would just add that when you finish an interview, maybe to say something like, or you don't get the job, if you get a decline, I would contact that company. Don't ask them why you didn't get the job, but just say, do you mind keeping my resume on file for about 90 days? Because I really enjoyed getting to know you and the organization. And while I'm all for that job that was posted, I also have a lot of flexibility with my skills, and I feel like I would be a good fit. They'll remember you. They will keep your resume, and they'll go back to it at some future time. So that's just another hook that I strongly suggest.
Awesome. Well, this has been so great. Thank you, panelists, for answering my questions. Now, I want to be mindful. We have about 10 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes for student questions. So students, if you have a question for the panelists, feel free either to take your microphone off of mute if you feel comfortable. Otherwise, feel free to ask your questions in chat, and I'll be watching to see what you all type. Yeah, Sabrina, yeah.
Hi, I have a question about cover letters, kind of more just generally if you have any advice for crafting an effective cover letter and how also important you think cover letters are in the job application process.
Disney is now saying don't use a cover letter. I like cover letters. I think that each one of them really do need to be customized to the. Everybody knows that you don't have time to update your resume with everything for each specific and different job, but a cover letter lets us know your passion, or if you have a kind of a life event that connects you to that organization. And just to say something like, I'm applying for this job because I am totally aligned with your mission to promote mental health and wellness across Tennessee. This is my life story. I can be reached at this time and place. Please note on my resume these 3 things. Thank you. So I think anything you could do to kind of customize it, keep it short, but give them the snapshot about why you're applying for that particular position.
I always like it when a candidate takes the time to make it custom, like Tom said. So if the letter says, especially if they're emailing it to me directly and they're saying to whom it may concern, I just am like, okay, I don't know if they really want this gig. So if you're applying to, my organization, taking that moment to say, like, address it as Omnicom Health Group, whatever the address, and like, dear Mr. Frankel, or whatever it is, I think that goes a long way. I think 3 paragraphs is sufficient, like a little about me, why I'm interested in your opportunity. Maybe then the second paragraph is maybe paralleling it back to your experiences and career aspirations. And the third is just the summary, like, I hope to hear from you about the opportunity. I think if it's much more than that, it's just too much. Recruiters get so many applicants that we just want to see, like, do they have a brain? Did they take a minute to just sort of stand out from the crowd? Like, can they communicate a message or an idea? So I hope that helps. I like cover letters, Sabrina. I think they're good if I'm stuck. If I'm like, this person's interesting, let me look at their cover letter. It could be the thing that puts them over the top.
Yeah, I agree with that. And like Tom and Ed said, it's tying it to a connection. So it may be something that you're passionate about, something that you've had experience in, something that, there's a personal connection. So making it very specific to that organization and that position. If you're sending me a general cover letter and I can see that, like Ed said at the top, I won't even read it. I'll go straight to the resume.
Somebody messaged me a question. Can I go there? So they mentioned that there was an opportunity they were interviewing for where the recruiter had misrepresented the opportunity. And they sort of, it looks like they figured out in the middle of the interview what the actual role was, which threw the person off. Like, wait, I thought I was interviewing for this, but it's for that. And there was a moment to try to pivot. They tried to adjust, but disappointment was clear, that maybe things weren't done. It's interesting. This happens occasionally. We interview, I don't know, 100 people a week at my company. And occasionally there's like a missing communication. Like, wait, I thought this was a senior account executive job, but you're interviewing me for an account executive job. So I would recommend, like, at the top, just sort of maybe even asking, like, verifying, like, you know, I'm really excited to be interviewing for this internship opportunity, this summer internship opportunity. And at that moment, if the recruiter's like, wait, hang on a second, I'm interviewing you to be my CEO, they'll catch it and recognize it in that moment. And I think if you realize in the middle of the interview, like, something's going terribly wrong, I'm going to share an example. I had an interview years ago, and it was supposed to be I put it in my calendar for 2 p.m. I was ready to roll at 2 p.m. The recruiter had actually written in the email 1 p.m. My brain took 1 p.m. and turned it into 2 p.m. At like 1:15, my cell phone starts ringing, and they're like, "Ed, are you coming to the interview? Our head of whatever is standing on the line for you." And I'm like, "Is the interview at 2 p.m.?" And they're like, "No, it's at 1 p.m. Now, I'm not going to argue with them. So I was like, oh my God, I must have made a terrible mistake. One recruiter mistake. The recruiter should have sent me an invite. We do that for every interview. But nonetheless, I'll own it. So I said, I'm available right now to jump on the call. I could do it right this moment. I made a mistake, and I apologize for that. And they said, you know what, Ed, that's okay. We'll give you a call if we're interested in pursuing your candidacy. And at that moment, it was dead. It was dead. And I moved on. I hung on to the story, but I moved on. So sometimes things go terribly wrong. You just move on.
But also make sure that you learn from that experience as
yes.
well. To double check your emails and make sure that, if you have something scheduled, to make sure it's on time. So yes, learn, you have to move on, you have to let it go, but really you have to also, have a takeaway and a learning experience from that as well.
I did send a note apologizing, and I said, I hope, who knows what the future may bring, but I have guests right now. So yeah, learn from it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, especially right now in age of virtual interviewing, making sure you have the time zones correct. I want to mention, if the time zone isn't in the email that they send you of, hey, let's chat at 1 p.m., let's not go ahead and assume it's their time zone or our time zone. If you ever have questions, it's always appropriate to shoot them an email and just say, hey, I just want to confirm, really looking forward to our conversation. Is this Central Time, Eastern Time, West Coast Time, Mountain Time? So keep that in mind as well.
So I had a question. My name's Aditi. I'm a senior right now, and so I'm looking for jobs mainly in the healthcare field. And one thing I found is that, what you guys kind of said seems that you guys could have gone a bunch of different paths, and you have throughout your careers. And so I guess I was just wondering how you kind of navigate potential different paths, especially when you're looking for an entry-level job. Because I'm interested in many things in healthcare, and I just get confused on how to navigate that.
Yeah, for me, it was teaching what I knew. That was one way. Is I did pretty good at my job for 2 or 3 years, and I taught adjunct at a junior college, a class or two. The faculty there helped to navigate me into a different field, which I, was not expecting. The other, was then from having a little experience and some teaching experience, I was then kind of a leader in a field, so I felt like I could have gone either way. Sometimes it depends on your major. If you major in something like psychology, education, those are really broad, and they allow you to pivot a little bit easier, I think, but that's not always the case. I think too, as you get your master's degree, as you get your experience, as you start becoming active in your trade association, you'll learn of other opportunities that would allow you either the flexibility to do something on the side or to, make that full switch in the fork in the road. So those opportunities just come along. Your natural interests will propel you that way.
I would say as you're in your career and you're, you know, how these other opportunities may arise is really, you know, being open to exploratory conversations. So you may be in a role, you see something that, oh, this may be of interest to me, setting that time up, getting into someone's calendar and saying, I see that you do this. I'm not really familiar with all is entailed, and it may be something that you're really interested in, or it may be, this is not something I want to do. So again, utilizing those resources and connecting with different folks just to learn as much as possible, because that can take your career on a different track.
Yeah, and maybe even to ask them if there's opportunities for cross-training. If those different tracks are within the same field, just showing that you're flexible and you would love to be cross-trained in some other areas, that shows a lot of initiative and motivation, but it also maybe gets you to explore some other interests.
Well, this has been wonderful. I want to be mindful of our panelists' time as well as the students' time. And so I want to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you all so much, panelists, for answering questions, spending your afternoons with us, as well as students for joining us. And just a reminder, this session will be recorded. And so it will be posted on Doorways in just a few days once we get the video trimmed and uploaded and everything. So if you have any questions regarding career services, what we can offer, Kathy and myself are more than happy to speak with you anytime. So again, panelists, thank you for joining us. We can do a little virtual clap, silent clap here for our panelists. But anyways, thank you all so much for joining us, and really thankful for everybody being here.